Hey guys, it's Tyler here from Rehab to Fab Designs. We are going to do a makeover on this antique ship robe or armoire cabinet, whatever you want to call it. Here you see behind me, I am using Dixie Belle in fluff. And then also I'm using flamingo, and you may recognize this finish because I actually just did it on another piece, and I had that piece posted on my Etsy shop, and it sold, and someone locally had came in to see it and actually wanted to buy it, but she waited around too long and the piece sold on Etsy first. So I actually had this piece here that is very similar in style to it, and so we're going to be redoing it in the same finish for her, and I thought I'd do a little recording for you guys just to show you how it's done. So my outer part around the doors and the frame is going to be flamingo, and then I'll be blending the fluff in the middle of them, and then we'll be putting a transfer on it at the end. But I wanted to show you guys how I'm going to be painting it. I am using a mister bottle here that I've got from Hobby Lobby to spray to keep my paint wet, and then the brushes I'll be using is Klingons. These are S30s, or a short handled one. I like them because of the short handle, because they're just easier for me to maneuver. They're wet because I keep them in water when I clean them after I'm done with them. I'll use one for each color and then one for my blend. Let's get started. So that took about 8 minutes to do this one side on the first coat. Now keep in mind, when you do your first coat, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to look as soft and nice, and that's okay because it is just your first coat, and we're not really worried about perfection on this coat. So you're just trying to get your paint on, get your lines, kind of decide where you want your dark and light to start, just to kind of get your view of how it's going to be when you finish up. Now, I do like to come around usually and go around the outside with the darker color, just to make sure it's seen on the inside panel here, but I'll probably just do that on my second coat. And then I'm going ahead and painting around the frame here on the outside where it's a different level or layer, different height. I am coming around it with just straight flamingo to darken it. That way you see that good contrast between that and the lighter part on the panel itself. And then we will come around, do the other side, and do the same exact thing on the doors. And then we'll start working on a second coat. And on your second coat is where you want to get more particular with your softness on your blend. And you'll notice too, when I start, I'm just kind of putting my paint on, trying to do it quickly because I'm trying to do this whole panel at once. Now when I do drawers, I'll do one drawer at a time as opposed to multiple, because the smaller the area you're working with, the easier it is to kind of control your paint and keep it from drying as quickly. And we do spray it with water to keep it wet, that way it moves more easily, but it will dry on you, and if you let it get too dry, or if you keep working it too long, it will start to kind of pull. And you'll be able to tell that because you'll see more paintbrush strokes. So you'll see lines from your paintbrush when it starts to pull. So I'm trying to put this on pretty quick, that way I can get it all blended and smooth, because if not, it's harder. Like say, for example, if I do the top third of this, and then I come down and do the middle and then the third, you still need to be able to work the whole panel together to get it nice and smooth. So it's a little easier to do that if you can do it all at once. But again, you got to be quick, otherwise it's going to start drying. So I'll do the same thing on each side in the front, and then come back and do the second coat, and then that's where we get kind of softer with those lines, and also softer with your brush strokes. So when you're painting it on normally, you just kind of use your brush and paint it on, you know, regularly. But as you start working that blend, you want to get your lines, your transitions from one color to the next smooth, so you don't see a hard line where you have flamingo and fluff. The idea is to blend the two colors together so that it's really soft looking. And so by using lighter brushes, lighter brush strokes with your brush, it's easier to do that because you're going really soft. So I get to the point where I'm just barely feather-like touching it, so it's really soft. That way it blends more smoothly, and that's when you get up in here because you want to hide those lines from one color to the next. Okay, so I'm gonna do this door here in real time. That is what the first coat is looking like on the other one after it's dried. So as you can see, I'm kind of focusing my lighter area here in the middle of this inlay where the panel is. And then when I do my second coat, I'll come back and clean this up around the edges where it kind of comes out a little bit. So you gotta work fast. So we're gonna start with the flamingo and come around here. I think I did my frame first on that one, but I can do that off camera so the video doesn't get too long. That's why I end up doing a lot of this stuff in time lapse, because if not, the video ends up being way too long. So for this, I'm kind of making sure I get it in the low spot here where the inlay is, and that's kind of where I set my kind of made my mark for my design as far as where I want the color to end. Uh-oh. And then just kind of a brush stroke width there. Make sure you get around the trim really good, and then I'll come back and do all this. But for this, we gotta work kind of fast, so it doesn't dry. That way we can blend this whole panel in one big swoop. There's that. And then I did come up a little high here, we don't want it to try to end perfectly here, because the Lord knows that would be too difficult to try to keep it perfect and smooth. So about right there for that, and then we'll bring this down a little bit. Again, remember, your first coat is kind of just where you're getting your layout of where you want your color to be. So next I'm going to pick up the fluff, and we're going to go right here in this middle panel. I'm going ahead and bringing it up just a little bit, but trying not to get too much on here so I don't contaminate. I poured off in another container. That way it's just what I'm using for this. This fluff is pretty light bright, and if I get that flamingo in it, you're gonna see it. So there's that. And I'm gonna pick up my third brush and also my spray bottle so I can wet it as needed. And start blending. So I kind of just go over the whole thing first, and it's going to pull a little bit of that flamingo down in here. And then you can hear it kind of get a little softer. And I can feel it dragging down here. So I'm going to wet that. And I always use vertical and horizontal brush strokes when I'm blending, because it softens the lines a little bit. And that already is pretty soft right there. Now when you do this, you're pulling a little bit of the white up in here. So, down some. We'll come back afterwards and come back over that part with the darker color, the flamingo in this case. And I'm just gonna drag those together. So if you're going in the lighter area, like I'll blend this here, because this middle part's probably gonna be the lightest part, right? And it'll kind of get darker as it goes. So if you're working from the light area, you wanna work from it and go towards the darker area. That way it kind of fans out. And then same goes here, wipe your brush off and work down to the lighter area. And then just come back and use your brush in a different direction and soften that up. And then we'll do this. So I'll start kind of here in the middle, and I'm going to work my way down into the darker area. And then I'm going to kind of come up from the dark to the light. And this is where I say it gets your light down here, but that's okay because we're going to come back over all that on our second coat and darken it. So now I'm going to start at the bottom and kind of work my way up. Change the direction of my brush. I feel it's dragging right there. You can feel it once you get used to it when it starts to drag. And that's when you wet your paint. Kind of reactivates it. And again, on your first coat, it doesn't have to be perfect. Although I will say it's kind of funny, not necessarily for blending if you're trying to get a perfect smooth blend, but just painting in general. It seems like I'll do one coat and I love it sometimes, and then, you know, if it's like a textured kind of grungy finish, and then I'll come back and put a second coat because I like to put at least 2 coats of paint on, even though we have 2 coats of primer, because I just feel like it is kind of, I don't know, better, more durable finish if it has 2 layers or 3 layers, 2 coats, 3 coats. But sometimes you come back and do your second coat, and for whatever reason, you just don't like it as well as the first. Because it's kind of hard to get it the exact same, especially if you're doing, like I say, a grungy kind of textured finish with drips and whatnot. So that's getting pretty smooth there. And I'm getting kind of lighter with my brush strokes as I go. Because we're not trying to move the paint at this point. We're just trying to blend it, trying to soften it. Probably good for our first coat. And then I'll come around the frame with just the flamingo for the dark area, all around the frame for that. And we'll do our first coat on this side here. Then we'll be ready for a second coat. Okay, so I'm about to start on my second coat. This is the first panel that I started with originally. So we're gonna go ahead and put a second coat on it, and I'll do it in real time. That way you can watch, and then I'll probably stop after that just because the video gets too long and it's kind of redundant. So you can do your frame first, or you can go around this first. I'm gonna go ahead and do this inside panel, because that's the part where we're going to be blending. And on this coat, you want to make sure you get all those edges really good where the inside panel meets the frame, because this will probably be our last coat unless for some reason something happens and I don't like the blend or get interrupted. That happens. Sometimes you get interrupted while you're painting, and if you're doing a blend, it's kind of hard. You can't really pick back up once it starts drying because it'll start pulling. So if that happens, you usually just have to let it dry completely and then start all over. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So you decided in your first coat kind of where you wanted your colors to be. Kind of, I guess, so to speak, how far out you want your lighter color to go. If you want it to go higher, you would just do that. If you want it a little lower, kind of do that. I'm going to kind of eyeball where it goes, and then of course it is blended and it is paint, so it's not going to be perfect. But just kind of see where you want it to go this time. Make sure, like I said, you get in those areas where your flat panel meets your outside part, your frame. And then again, kind of move kind of fast, because we don't want it to start drying on us and start pulling. And I've got a fan above me, and the heat is on. It's winter here, if that's what you call it in Georgia. We've had some pretty chilly days. It's been kind of in the 40s. So our shop is really cold. When I came in this morning, it was like 50 something, I think, in here. So I had to come in and turn the heat on and let it warm up while I sat in the car for a little bit. So I turned the fan on, that way it kind of helps circulate the heat. So keep that in mind when you're painting. It is going to kind of accelerate your dry time. So if you need to, turn off any fans that are nearby. That is probably about where I want my line to be. So that was my flamingo. Now I'm going to pick up my fluff, and I'm going to come right here in the middle. And I'm going to go right over to the outside where the flamingo is. As I'm applying this, and you can overlap it if you need to, that's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. The only thing it's going to do is contaminate your paint when you get it on your brush. But I have this poured off in a smaller container, so it's fine. I just have in here what I'm going to be using. Which is my blending brush, which has a whole lot of paint on it, as you can see. You'll want to keep a paper towel nearby so you can wipe it. And I'm going to spray it, make sure it's nice and wet so we can get that paint moving. When paint is wet, it will automatically blend if you have two colors side by side and you start brushing them together. That's just what it does. So if you're blending paint, you want those to be together, you want them to be wet, and you want to mix them together. So I'm mixing the white, the fluff, with the orange, which is flamingo, because they're both wet. So if you don't want to mix your colors, you're going for, say, like a grungy kind of textured piece, layered piece, so where you see all the different layers of colors, then you want to do a color, let it dry, and then go back and add your other color, because it makes sense, right, that if they're wet, they're going to blend together. So same thing here, horizontal and vertical. Just moving that color around, and we'll come back around and do the frame. But right now we're basically making a lighter shade of the flamingo because we're mixing it with the fluff. And then you wipe your brush off if you need to, so you can remove it. So I'll let that. And I'll start at the top and then kind of start working it down. So what that's doing is bringing my darker color from the top more towards the middle. And then starts blending those colors to soften them. If you want more dark, just add it. Get softer and softer with your brush strokes. And you start kind of getting your blend the way you want it. That way it's not really pulling your colors, but just kind of softening them from one to the next. Now when you're blending, you have to be careful when you're spraying water. Like if you're doing drawers, for this piece, it doesn't really matter because I'm just doing this whole side panel at one time. But if you're doing drawers, you'll want to be careful when you're spraying water because you'll get one drawer done and you'll love the way it looks, and then you spray water when you start working on the next drawer and it may mess up the one you just finished. So you have to be careful of spraying if you're spraying directly on the piece. Another thing you can do, instead of spraying directly on the piece, is to spray your brush. So you would just take your spray bottle and spray your brush. Really light feathery strokes here. hopefully this down here is not so dry that I can't blend it. So if it starts drying, you know, you can spray with your water, but I will tell you, if it's too dry and you spray it, it's just gonna leave splatters on it. So keep that in mind. So that's why I say to try to work fast as you can. So I'm starting here in the middle and kind of working my way down to pull the white down. And then I'll start kind of at the bottom and pull that up. I'm going to try to get this middle part kind of done. And then I'll come and do that bottom. Because I want this to be able to blend with the part I just did before that's all completely dry. Soft. You just keep doing this until you get it the way you want it. But again, keep it in mind, you've got to keep it wet if you're going to move your paint. But also, once it does start to dry, you can, if you keep wetting it, if it's too dry, it will pull your paint. So just be careful with that. And try to move kind of quick, and hopefully you won't have any issues. coats on that, and then I'll come back, like I say, around this frame here with my flamingo just to darken that where I got some of the lighter paint on it, and do the same thing on the other side in the front panels, and that's it, guys. We'll be done. Okay, so for this, once it's dry, I am just going right back around it with my paint. And then if you need to, you can spray a little bit of water right here where that blended area kind of overhangs, and then just kind of arch your brush right around that.